on the other one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
Whether you like the live-action films or not, I think most people can agree that the Bumblebee movie had some killer designs. Putting aside the persistent oversaturation of G1 for a second, the designers of this film took the best aspects of the Bay designs and refined them into absolute bangers. Mostly. Arguably, one of the best designs the film presented was the Seeker body type, and thank for that, because we've seen what happens when they up a Seeker right out the gate. But if you were present in the fandom when the film was announced, you would have seen the Blitzscream outcry. Due to continuity issues with previous films, which is now basically a moot point considering this is all but confirmed to be a retroactive reboot, they weren't able to use Starscream in the opening battle on Earth. He was okay on Cybertron, but it just wouldn't have worked on Earth, because you know. So, the Seeker who actually fights Bumblebee is Blitzwing, and the fandom collectively lost its mind over this. Complaints and memes, Jesus Christ, it was so annoying. Yes, because the Bayverse has always been accurate to its source material! The thing is, now that we have both Blitzwing and Starscream in plastic form, I think it's genuinely interesting to take a look at the two handlings of this body type. Yes, the robot modes are similar, but this is not the same toy. No parts are shared, not even the transformation is similar. So, which is better? Well, greetings Cybertronians, I'm DrLockdown, and welcome back to another Versus review. For today's diagnosis, we're pitting two similar yet somehow both unique, yet somehow both killer designs against each other. Studio Series SS-65 Blitzwing and SS-72 Starscream. You know, come to think of it, Blitzwing and Starscream are basically how I wanted the clones to be done. Kind of similar robot modes, but vastly different vehicle modes and transformations. It really shows that Studio Series goes above and beyond to make sure that each character gets the best treatment it can. Well, at least recently anyway. Yes, I am deliberately ignoring Studio Series 86. How did you know? That's not to say that either of these alternate modes are perfect though. We're dealing with a fairly rigid $50 price point, one that may have to make a jump soon due to inflation. Things are going to be sacrificed, such as in Blitzwing's case with any and all screen accuracy. Right off the bat, this isn't Blitzy Boy's Jet Mode. I'm not a vehicle mode expert, and at no point do I pretend to be. But come on, it's pretty damn obvious that this in no way resembles that. Now, the reason for this is a little more complicated than copyright bad, since apparently Hasbro already has the rights from the company. At least that's what I've heard. The wiki doesn't seem to verify it. From what I can gather, the reason at play is actually for the sake of the robot mode, since Blitzwing's wings on the CGI model don't particularly match up with the actual wings on the jet. Considering that this is a Voyager-class figure that has to be fun to transform, either the robot mode would end up with wings thinner than my patience for Lorenzo's reboot/not reboot antics, or this would happen. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, and given the circumstances, I understand perfectly. This mold actually had a difficult development cycle, evident by how much it was delayed. The Bumblebee movie came out in December 2018, with leaked listings for a Studio Series version of this guy all over the place, but he didn't come out until mid to late 2020. From this we can gather the designers didn't take this decision lightly, and you know what, honestly it's fine. I get that there's a small group of people who scrutinize the Studio Series line whenever it deviates from its accuracy checklist, but as far as I can gather, most people are perfectly fine with choices like this. That said, when you don't have the accuracy crutch to rest on, it falls down to the design itself, and this is where we start to hit some pitfalls. But first, the good. The wash effect on the front is pretty nice. It's done like this so the torso of the robot mode gets a nice healthy dose of dark grey, and the way it's incorporated is pretty neat. It's also a pretty nice nose cone overall. It could look a little meaner, but the transparent orange is damn lovely. Also, very nice touch how the robot chin becomes the pilot seat. Damn clever if you ask me. Overall, the profile is pretty good. It's certainly not the cleanest jet mode on the planets, with the arms pretty obviously on show, but from the side it's not that bad. This is due to the pretty unique leg transformation. Well, in general it's not extremely unique, but I sure as hell haven't seen it on a jet mode before. And from the underside, yes, there are a bunch of robot bits. It's a jet form and this is to be expected. However, looking at this, there isn't really any way to tell how it transforms. It's weird and wacky, and it doesn't draw much attention to itself. Honestly, after last week's review, this is a lovely breath of fresh air. The top also has some pretty nifty detail. It's not the best mechanical detail I've ever seen on a jet. In fact, that's one aspect where I think the Earthrise version has it beat. But it is appreciated. And sure, once you get to the back, you can instantly tell no effort was made to copy the back of the Phantom, but given how much of a departure everything else is, I reckon it fits the design quite well. I really like the dual V-fin stabilizer, if that's what they're called. And the way the gun stores at the back works almost seamlessly. Like, if you take it off and see what it looks like without, sure, it becomes a little more conspicuous in retrospect, but while it's on, it's pretty good. You also get storage for the little hand doodads, but, yeah, the gun storage was better. Still, I'm really liking the recent commitment to weapon storage in this line, especially in the Bumblebee stuff. It's something they absolutely didn't have to do, but it shows they went the extra mile, along with minor details such as the wheels on the back, which, let me tell you, I have certainly missed on jet formers. It's clear that the designers have pushed this mold as far as it could go. And perhaps they pushed it a little too far because, these wings are pretty rough. Now, I'm not complaining about the shape. This was something that I and pretty much everyone else knew going in. What I take issue with is the presentation outside of that. The mechanical detail is far too minimalist, along with the insanely lackluster paint. You get a red stripe at the back, and that's pretty much it. Not painting the wings is fine if you're dealing with other colors, but this is bordering on Games Workshop grey, so something was needed. Out of all the figures on my Repro Labels wish list, this right here takes the top spot, thanks to these wings. I don't hate this jet mode at all, but it feels far less premium than most other figures in this line. And I get it, this mold is already doing a lot with its budget, but maybe instead of the red line tambograph, it could have been swapped out for some con symbols? Come on, Repro Labels, I know you only do like 2 movie bots a year, but we need you in this desperate time. Honestly though, that's the only flaw I can think of with this vehicle, save for the exposed screws near the nose cone, but come on, that's so minor. You barely notice it.
Barely an inconvenience.
Sadly, this one flaw takes a jet that could be pretty damn neat despite its lack of accuracy and turns it into something that feels kinda bland. We've seen how this could have turned out with Jet Shatter, a figure that's lacking in accuracy but is still equally awesome. Actually, maybe more so, but I don't know. Point is, accuracy doesn't always correlate with quality, and that isn't the issue here. The issue here is the general presentation, and as such, I'm a little disappointed. Presentation is an aspect that Starscream has in spades though, because wowzers, this is a sweet Tetrajet. At this point, the uninformed are probably scratching their heads, wondering what the hell they're supposed to be looking at. To explain, fellas, this is a Tetrajet. You had your Tetrajets back on Cybertron in G1, then they got redone in War Within / Titanium, surprisingly good mold by the way. Then they had their stint in Cybertron, which took inspiration from the War Within version. Then High Moon took a crack at them, then War for Cybertron did a boxier version of the G1 version, and it turned out to be one of the best Seeker molds of the past decade. Yes, I will die on that hill, and now we have this. This is probably the furthest deviation from the source material we've seen so far, really leaning into the overhanging wings concept. It doesn't look like a Transformers designer designed this, but rather a film designer. Oh gee, who'da thunk it? As for whether it's any good, hell the yeah it is. The angles on this thing are insane, with one of the meanest space nose cones I've ever seen. It's sharp enough to make even Last Night Megatron and Studio Series 2007 Megatron blush. It's surprising too, considering this is made out of the same soft rubber plastic that sheer examples often use for safety reasons. I'm also digging the exposed plastic pistons at the top, very lovely detail. In fact, overall this thing is covered head to toe, or rather, fin to garbly, in fantastic mechanical detail. On the whole, it evokes a sort of 80s/90s anime aesthetic, where every cell was hand-drawn with all sorts of greebles, fitting considering the influence. Mad props to how the legs fold up too. Yes, technically Blitzwing had to do more considering he was pushing everything into an Earth mode, but these legs fit almost seamlessly. I mean, sure, the bright red waist block is a little conspicuous, a detail that I'll get to later down the track, but I gotta say I really like how smooth the top section is. The wings also remain pretty smooth, well, at least in the profile sense. The detail is killer, and see, this is what I was looking for in Blitzwing. Plenty of mechanical detail and tons of red. Also Decepticon logos. See, Studio Series designers, you can put con logos on your figures. Come to think of it, I'm sure I've mentioned it in another review, but why does Studio Series consistently omit logos? Is it the car company? Is the detail not leaving much room? I'd really like to see the designers address that point at some point. But yes, from a visual perspective, Starscream demolishes Blitzwing. Unfortunately, this mode features a lot of minor annoyances overall. In fact, without context, it might even seem that he's a worse jet mode, space or no. First off, I don't like the yellow they chose. He's trying to do the same thing as the orange seen on Blitzwing, but it's got this sickly quality to it, and it feels like it's not putting in as much visual effort as the other plastics. Like, you've got POW! Red, POW! Blue, then yellow. It just doesn't pack the same punch, you know? Maybe it's the plastic they chose, using a similar rubbery material to the nose spike. Matter of fact, it may actually be the same material as said nose spike. If so, I kinda get it, but there had to be a way to make it look better. Secondly, these gaps in the wings are incredibly unsightly. I get that they have to transform in a certain way, but there had to be a solution here that covered these up. And yes, you can distract yourself from it with the null rays. These peg on quite solidly, and I love how they're perfectly angled for the curvature of the wings. But they're still there. From the wrong angle, they still look pretty unsightly. Not as unsightly as the underside of the jet though, because Jesus Christ, what am I looking at? Look, I understand that this design isn't the easiest to engineer a toy out of, doubly so when this is literally the first effort. Ain't no form of hindsight on this one.
God damn it, it's so messy the camera won't even focus on it.
But still, this is a hodgepodge. You've got the torso just sitting there with the arms barely curled up into it, and very loosely being held on by the gun. And yes, the gun does a good job of drawing your attention away from everything else, to the point where I consider it superior weapon storage to Blitzwings. But for f***'s sake, these gaps on the side are borderline amateurish. Am I saying that I could have designed something better? No, but I am saying that it baffles me when people complain about Cleany McClean face on the bottom of the War for Cybertron Tetrajets, but somehow this gets a pass. To a certain extent, all jets have underkibble, but this this is just excessive. So, 3 floors versus 1 floor should mean Blitzwing takes the cake, right? Well, here's the thing. It's all about how these modes overcome their flaws. Beyond the lack of paint, what does Blitzwing offer as a jet? To be honest, only a passable experience, an average one, something that functions but doesn't inspire. Starscream may have 3 pretty glaring issues, but beyond that, he's got paint, he's got sculpting, he's got a neat profile, he's got tamper graphs, he's got personality. He's infinitely more swooshable than Blitzwing, evident by the fact that Blitzwing feels appropriately measured with only a width and length descriptor, whereas Starscream requires a height one on top of that. Yeah, you might have noticed I don't feel it necessary to discuss the height of jet modes, but in this instance it's pretty necessary. My point is I get more play value from this mode, because it gives me more to work with. It's not even the accuracy argument, as I said before, it's the overall design aspect. Blitzwing is a passable alt mode, whereas Starscream is a great alt mode with a few annoyances. So honestly, I think the point in this mode goes to the treacherous bastard. And before you ask, no, it's not because Blitzwing doesn't turn into a tank. I'm sick and tired of that excuse. The one step doesn't count and the comics aren't canon. F off, whiners. I don't dislike Blitzwing, but the superior jet seems pretty damn obvious to me. And you know what? Good. Blitzwing, as much as I want him to, isn't getting any redecos in the future, whereas Starscream most certainly is. It's important to get at least the jet mode right on a Seeker, and fortunately Blitzwing is just a one-off. Of course, it may seem preposterous comparing 2 vastly different modes. These 2 aren't similar really, save for the weapons and the cockpits. So, let's move on and bring these 2 closer together, shall we? Decepticons, untransform, and unrise up, fall down... whatever. Transformation time. Despite both of these technically being Seekers and taking aesthetic cues from the G1 Seeker design, neither have a very Seeker-y transformation. And for that, I'm really grateful. The Studio Series line has been doing amazing engineering as of late, ignoring the Studio Series 86 part of it. Except Grimlock, he feels more like a chug figure than whatever 86 is going for. But the point is, both of these have very interesting transformations. But what about the execution of such? Well, starting off with Blitzwing, the first thing you want to do is remove all the accessories. Oh no, parts forming again. Yeah, that joke's getting old, and yes, you also have to take off the missiles. But, I mean, that's fine, it's weapon parts forming, it is what it is. Take this whole section and pull it up, along with the arms, and the whole thing separates. Come to the top panel here and unfold it a little bit, so basically there are 2 parts that unwrap from the legs themselves, and the legs themselves are really bloody good. You separate them, fold in the wings on both sides, untab it from the foot, and retab it in by folding it in like so, rotate it around 180 degrees, bring in the foot, and fold out the toes. Now, this transformation isn't exactly a unique one. I have seen it on several figures before, ones that I've discussed before as well. Mainly Titan's Return Cup and the previously reviewed DX9 Carry. But I've never seen it on a jet before, and using it in this context is bloody brilliant. Take the nose cone and rotate it around 180 degrees. Of course, make sure that the landing gear is all the way in. And then you've got a very specific set of steps to get this whole chest section into place. The first thing you want to do is open up the cockpit. You've got a slot there and a tab there in the landing gear, and they peg together like so. Come on, there we go. Then you bring this entire hinge section all the way back to there. It just sits there, it doesn't lock into place, sadly. But now that that's done, you can rotate this section up just a little bit, and while you've got enough clearance, rotate the head around 180 degrees. Then you've got a slot there and a tab there, and that will lock into place, also locking the shoulders into place. Well, kinda. The whole section is still a bit loose in some regards, but you'll see why later. In the meantime, close up the cockpit, bring down the shoulder section like so. Again, sadly no way to tab it in, but whatever. Then we can start working on the arms. You just rotate them down like so, bring out the little shoulder doohickey, and rotate this panel inward like that. And then last but not least, we just have to work the backpack. Take this section here and fold it around 180 degrees. Then you'll be looking here and wondering, oh, how does that work? Well, actually, it's a double hinge. Secret double hinge. And then you've got 2 tabs there, 2 slots there. Nice and easy, and push down a bit so that that holds it into place. Sadly, that's the only thing holding the shoulders in place, so it is a little bit weak and can fall apart, but it is what it is. Finally, rotate the wing tips up like so, and then also fold these back a little bit. They've got their own little hinge there, something I did not notice when I first owned this figure. And my word, they really bring this design to life. So ultimately, it's a very clean and satisfying transformation. It's addicting. I want to keep doing it over and over again. It's hella fun. That nice balance between complexity and simplicity. This is what I love about most Studio Series figures recently. Again, ignoring Studio Series 86, but I keep repeating myself on that one. So yeah, probably one of the best Studio Series jet transformations I've seen. Good job. Now, Starscream's transformation is a little more amateurish. It's very clever in several regards, but it doesn't feel as, well, mature mature as Blitzwing back there. I can see them pushing the design to the limit though. The designer clearly tried to do what they could. It just doesn't feel like a senior designer worked on this, whereas it did with Blitzwing. And that's fine, it's still a fun transformation. Again, first thing you want to do is remove all of the accessories. Sadly, these can't remain on during the transformation. And then you've got the gun that comes off there, and you'll notice it's tabbed in there and those two. That's the only thing keeping all of this in place. That's a bit of a bummer. I've already gone on about how unsightly this section is because of all the hollowness here. And no, it's not an excuse for the screen model, it's just poorly designed. Could have been more forgiving though if there were more locking tabs. As you can see, no locking tabs, whatever, they just come out. But enough of that. Separate these two parts and fold these two bits out. That'll give you enough clearance to bring the arms out like so. Might as well bring the wings up like so, so we've got some more space too. You bring these little side panels and they nicely lock into place on the sides of the chest here and here. You can then bring the arms into place by rotating the shoulders, rotating the biceps, and folding out the fists. Nice and easily. You then take the legs and you separate them from the chest module like that, and you'll notice that it's basically folded himself in half like so to transform. Keep these two sections out all the way so you can untab the nose cone. It's on a very tight locking mechanism, fold it in, and then these two bits peg together on the back there. Bring the collar section up just a little bit. That'll give you enough clearance to push the whole torso all the way around. It doesn't lock into place, but this section will. Nice and solid. Much more solid than Blitzwing. Anyway, from here you can separate the legs, rotate them out 180 degrees, and you can see kinda how everything's gonna work. Each part works slightly differently. You untab and move it around here, then you can take that panel and fold it in there, and this panel and fold it in on top of that. Then always bring the foot out before you fold all of those panels in, otherwise the foot's just gonna get in the way of everything. Becomes nice and solid and hides away all of that panel stuff. The panel stuff isn't really indicative of a lot of Studio Series engineering, it's more indicative of what third party or a fan project would do, but I think it works alright here. It's not the most elegant way of doing things. I mean, Blitzwing did things way more elegantly, but it's still fine. This side works a little bit differently though. Sure, this part still untabs and moves around. The panels still work pretty much the same there, and with this part there, but then you move this section down in, but you'll notice that there's this little doodad over here. So you fold it up, and fold it against the side. Would have been nice if that actually folded into the cavity, but it works alright. Anyway, last but not least, my favorite part of the transformation. Rotate this little end of the wing around and fold it in on itself. You can then rotate that up and rotate this section up. Jesus Christ, that is a really clever wing transformation. Almost forgives that little hollowness section in the vehicle mode. It's still a bit unsightly, but seeing what it actually ends up doing in the end, yeah, I can kinda see what they were going for. Of course, being the complete idiots that I was, I completely forgot 2 steps. Well, 1 step times 2. What you want to do is take these bits and pull them out, but it'll go all the way out, so you just want to bring them back in so that it sits nice and comfortably against there. These are supposed to mimic the pistons that are on the body. On the screen model, that is. Blitzwing doesn't have that because he already incorporates it into the transformation, but they needed to add in faux parts for Starscream, and I think it works alright. Not as good as Blitzwing, but still pretty good. And that's your lot, really. It's a pretty interesting, pretty unique transformation. I don't think I've seen anything like it in plastic form before, whether official or third party. But ultimately, I gotta give the win to Blitzwing. Starscream tries more, and he has to do more given his complex design, but Blitzwing has an elegance to him. Yes, it's a difference in transformation ideology. This one is pushing everything to the limits, but Blitzwing is just more fun. This feels like the start of something great, whereas this feels like the culmination of years and years of design work. So, point to Blitzwing. But don't get me wrong, both of these are pretty damn good transformations. If you're someone who likes the tactile nature of these action figures, which is the kind of person I definitely am, then these are both worthwhile purchases for the transformation alone. Neither one is bad, it's just, this one is amazing. Now this right here is where the comparisons start to become a lot closer. This very clearly looks like an evolution between robot modes, going from Cybertronian to Earth-based. You can see the clear progression here, which is more than I can say for some previous examples. Starting off with Mr. Did You Think You Could Hide? Mate, this is one cool robot mode. Blitzwing exudes a feeling of effortlessness, much like the transformation he just went through. Like, take a look at the ruddy perfect chest design. It's awesome how they've managed to incorporate the pistons into the transformation itself, and the vent detail on the side really brings the whole thing together, along with a fantastic paint. No chipping, by the way. Take that, Starscream! No, not that Starscream. That Starscream! Now, yes, the top of the torso is a faux part, but they still managed to cram the actual nose cone in there properly, and this is actually a really difficult design to pull off. In CGI renders, it looks far simpler than your traditional Bayformer, but compared to a lot of Bayformer designs, it's actually a lot harder to figure out how it transforms. Well, excluding the bullshit that got thrown at us in the last 2 films, but we don't talk about those. And sure, the orange doesn't quite match with the clear plastic, but it doesn't exactly draw attention to itself either, and it's certainly a better color choice than well, we'll discuss that in a bit. In the meantime, the head sculpt is ruddy perfect as well. Legitimately, this has to be one of my favorite head sculpts from the whole line. Oddly enough, it's actually assembled from 3 different parts, in order to get that last tiny bit of clear orange on the tips of the gas mask. This is not something the CGI model did, going for more of a red trim, but it, this looks hella cool and ultimately way better. Moving on to the arms, I've seen people complain about these little winglets. In fact, many people have taken to swapping them around so that they swish back. And yeah, they are weird and certainly don't match up with the shoulder detail he's supposed to have, but I don't think they look all that bad. Besides, there's a shit ton of detail on the lower arms, including vents, hoses, and pistons. It's all here. I also love the red trim on the forearms. It's subtle but does a fantastic job of adding flair. Not as good as the hip skirts though, I would argue. First time owners may skip over this without realizing, but the hip skirts actually fold out if you so desire. I love this detail. It adds that extra little bit of swishness to an already brilliant design. They're painted fantastically too, which helps you overlook how unpainted the lower legs are. It's unfortunate, but well, there's still plenty of detail on show, and the wing kibble management is positively lovely. And my word, the feet design. Don't know why, but I find this extremely cool. Even the accessories turned out well. You've got the 2 missiles that peg into the wings, and although said wings look alright without them, once you put them there, you'll wonder why you ever chose to leave it naked in the first place. With the pods attached and the wings swept back, man, this design looks awesome. You also get a really nice looking gun, which does a surprisingly good job of covering up the hand and making it look like it's embedded in the forearm, going full Transformers Prime style. The back section may look unassuming, but it ends up looking pretty cohesive, which is something I wasn't expecting. Part of this is due to the addition of an extra tab that slots into the wrist, which is a relief because one of the fists is actually articulated. Why, you may ask? Well, it's so you can recreate that famous scene from the movie with Studio Series 57 Off-Road Bumblebee. Without a stand port, it can be a little difficult to position it, especially with the tolerances of a Voyager elbow hinge. But hey, it's really neat that they bothered to add this feature in the first place. Your average Studio Series toy would have probably glossed over it, but the designers clearly went above and beyond. Damn nice if you ask me. Of course, the scene isn't quite complete yet, so thankfully either hand detaches to fit the final accessory, which is of course, well, you know.
Behold, Perry the Bumblebee, my Let's Magnificaminator! With one stab, it will give you a useless voice gimmick for decades to come!
Okay. Again, this was something they could have easily ignored, and maybe the overall package would have turned out better if they had ditched one of these features and replaced it with better jet mode paint, but you, this is hella cool. Also, the hands are both 5mm compatible, and you know what that means? GoBot hands! Yeah, I'm just gonna say it, this is probably one of the best Studio Series robot modes they've ever done, and it's certainly the best out of the Bumblebee lineup. There's so little I can find fault with. I mean, sure, there are a few annoyances here and there, like the fact the wing tips like to pop off. Apparently the plastic tolerances push it out of the peg bit by bit, and there's supposed to be a fix out there. If I ever find it,
you can be sure I'll turn it into an instructional video, old chum.
the chest solidity is a bit more annoying though. Moving the arms tends to cause the whole thing to come apart. I'm happy the shoulders are tight, but there should have been more locking tabs in the torso to keep it together. Still, as long as you keep everything held in place whilst moving the arms, there shouldn't be an issue, and it doesn't hamper any play value at all. He's fun to look at, fun to play with, and he makes a killer display piece. Even to this day, I'm still finding hidden details when taking a closer look. Now that is the mark of a good design. Overall, he's the perfect marriage of paint and sculpting. Starscream, on the other hand, kinda wobbles around a bit in the marrying of paint and sculpt, or rather fumbles when he tries to merge the Bayverse stylings into G1. Now, the design isn't bad by any means, and the robot mode is still fun to mess with. It's certainly a more solid affair than Blitzwing at least. None of the bits, ignoring the accessories, fall off when posing this guy, and on the whole, he poses roughly the same as his predecessor. I reckon my favorite aspect would have to be the wings. The detail on these bad boys is insane, and the profile they create is unlike anything I've ever seen on a Seeker. Hell, it's unlike anything I've ever seen on a Transformer, especially at this price point. I also love the shoulder sections with their multi-layered vents. Like, Blitzwings were cool, but this blows it out of the water entirely. And those are the two elements that I definitively like with this mode. Don't get me wrong, there's very little I actively dislike, but on the whole, everything's slightly off. Take the arms, for instance. The red strip on the inner elbow part is really lovely, and I love the fake teeth on the joint, but the arm itself tries to blend rounded panels with sharp edges at the back, and it doesn't quite work. Plus, all the detail is hidden on the inside for some reason. Yeah, it's nice that they painted the whole thing in gunmetal, but most of the time you can barely see it. Also, there's nowhere to plug the damn null rays in. Yeah, you still get the same sort of gun Blitzwing got, and no, it's surprisingly not a shared part, but come on man, that's Seeker Design 101. And where they do end up pegging it is so loose that you'd think it wasn't intentional. You can't even hold them because the pegs are so loose. Then you've got the thighs, which go for this Hearts of Steel look that just doesn't blend with the rest of the design. And no, that's not what the CGI model looks like, so don't try to use that excuse as a crutch. Again, I don't hate it, especially in this lovely gunmetal, but I can't say I particularly like it either. Then you've got the way the fins fold into the leg, and as such, the front ends up feeling awfully flat in terms of detail, especially in comparison to the parts of the robot that took bits wholesale from the Tetrajet mode. There's also no blend between the blue parts and the outward thrusters, so it looks like he's cosplaying as Captain Puffy Pants. You know, the member of the bootleg Wiggles. But the most off-looking part would probably have to be the colors. I'm sorry, but I just don't think they work here. It gives off the feeling of a bad BotCon exclusive. You know the ones when they try to force a character into a mold that clearly doesn't work? I don't know if saturating the red or desaturating the blue would have fixed anything, but I just don't think it works that well. Granted, this probably won't be an issue with the eventual billion redecos this thing gets, but with what we have here now, it very much is. And to reiterate, I don't dislike any of the robot mode elements. They're ultimately fine, but definitely compromised thanks to being slightly, well, off. I can point to two distinct elements that are properly bad though, even if I don't find myself hating them. First up, this head sculpt sucks. No, it's not quite core class Starscream levels, but it's more akin to a gremlin than it is to Starscream. And you know why it's like this? They painted the eyebrows instead of the eyes. Like, what the how do you screw this up? It's not like Studio Series does this all the time. Oh wait, hello nostril paint! I'm not sure if painting the eyes properly would have fixed anything, but it couldn't have been as bad as this. Still, I don't consider it to be as bad as the nose cone section. I've already gone over my grievances with the sickly yellow on display, but now you have to put up with this baffling color choice. Why did they go with this type of yellow? We already had the perfect choice on Blitzwing. There's no reason they couldn't have just reused that. It's not like the yellow appears elsewhere on the body to save on budget. This is just another stupid decision with the design overall. And here's the thing, the head and the chest are front and center. If one's slightly off but the other's fine, I can typically give it a pass. But when the entire core of the robot mode f***s around, the whole thing loses its visual appeal. It's a real shame too. I can see the designer trying their damned best to push this into the quality stratosphere, especially with how good the vehicle mode and the transformation were. But they got tripped up at the last minute. I do not consider this to be a bad robot, but I don't think it's a particularly good one either. There's fun to be had, but I think the winner is pretty clear. I mean, it's not like the articulation is all that different between the two. Blitzwing does get the wrist swivels due to the swappable hand feature, but I don't think either design really requires wrist articulation to begin with. And sure, Starscream does get some slight forward foot motions, but it's so situational that I don't think it counts. For all intents and purposes, they play the same, right down to the waist swivel that gimps itself with the use of a mechanical loincloth. Quick talk for a sec, this is stupid. Waist swivels are awesome and all, but putting a panel in front of it that's attached to the part above said waist swivel ruins the effect. It makes the whole thing look straighter than it actually is, and it renders the articulation there useless. Please don't do this, Hasbro, it's stupid. But back on topic, yes, Starscream is technically bigger, but that doesn't automatically make him better. An upscale of a shitty masterpiece toy is still a shitty masterpiece toy. Neither of these toys are shitty, but out of the two, I think I have to give both the robot mode and the overall win to Blitzwing. I respect what Starscream is trying to do more, but again, there's that elegance with Blitzwing that just can't be beat. His sculpting, his paintwork in the robot mode, his engineering, and even his accessories, it all forms a truly memorable package. This is a Voyager that I reckon will be remembered years down the line, along with the likes of Reveal the Shield, Lugnut, and Kingdom Cyclonus. At least I hope for the latter. He's a damn fine release. Honestly, I kinda wish he got the redeco treatment instead of Starscream. Still, maybe that's part of what makes him special, the fact that he's only here once. He's a one-off slice of brilliance, and ain't no lackluster alt mode gonna stop him. That doesn't make Starscream bad by any means, though. Yes, there are issues with this robot mode, but the transformation is still interesting, and the vehicle mode is still utterly fantastic. Plus, here's the thing about lackluster colors. He's a goddamn seeker. They've at least put in enough effort the first time around, so that better versions later down the line can build upon a solid foundation. We've seen what happens when Hashtag don't do that, and thank f*** that's not happening here. I still recommend this mold, but maybe wait for the eventual thrust that should be receiving photos in the form of leaks or official announcements any day now. He's been listed practically everywhere, thankfully getting demoted from Target exclusive to regular old mainline release. And no, I'm not talking about this thrust, I'm talking about this thrust. Yes, in the Bumblebee movie, thrust is actually an Armada callback. And you know me, I love me some Unicron Trilogy love. I do hope that version ends up turning out better, because that may secure this mold a spot on my best of 2021 list. As it stands now, the mold isn't on there yet, but who knows, maybe one day it might be. You know, all of this Bumblebee movie love reminds me a lot of the 2006 Classics period. Yes, the designers do have one foot firmly in G1, but they're also not afraid to experiment in weird and unique ways. And that's one of the reasons I'm glad that Hashtag is continuing the Cybertronian lineup for the Bumblebee movie in the Studio Series line. And apparently a lot of other people are glad as well. I mean, just take a look at what T-Fanpage 101 put together with the announcement of Brawn. In these dark times where, everywhere you look, G1 rears its ugly sunbow head, this and Beast Wars are the two shining lights. As Studio Series 86 unfortunately spreads its influence even more on an already overshadowed block, it's nice to know that there's still hope for the live-action movie designs, even if not all of them look the best. So keep on doing these, Hashtag. You've done a brilliant job so far, and I hope you continue to do as good a job in the future.